For 3,000 years, one question has quietly haunted human thought. Is caring about yourself wrong? Most of us were taught that selfishness is wrong. Share your toys, put others first, don't be greedy. And yet, as adults, the message quietly reverses. Love yourself. Protect your energy. Set boundaries. You cannot give what you do not possess. So, which truth are you supposed to live by? The answer, as it turns out, has never been fixed. It depends on when and who you ask. Let's start in ancient Greece, around 400 BCE. The philosophers here are wrestling with what seems like a logical impossibility. Plato notices something odd. When you act virtuously, say, helping a stranger, you feel good, that warm glow of satisfaction. But if helping others makes you feel good, aren't you still doing it for yourself? This is what we might call the paradox of altruism. Every act that appears selfless still returns something. If not material, then psychological, a clear conscience, a sense of meaning, the quiet approval of others. Plato's student Aristotle took this further. He argues that this isn't a flaw in human behavior, it's the structure of it. Human beings are oriented toward one thing: eudaimonia, not mere happiness, but flourishing, the art of living well. And here's the twist. For Aristotle, you can't flourish alone. Humans are social animals. Your well-being is tied up with your community's well-being. So caring for yourself requires caring for others. It's not selfishness versus altruism, it's that genuine self-interest includes other people. The Greeks called this enlightened self-interest. You help your neighbor not despite self-interest, but because of it. Their success contributes to a stable, prosperous community which benefits you. But not everyone agreed with this cozy picture. Enter Christianity, and suddenly the game changes completely. Early Christian thinkers faced a dilemma. In the teachings attributed to Jesus Christ, ethical value is no longer grounded primarily in flourishing or excellence, but in restraint, in humility, in the decentering of the self. Love your neighbor as yourself. Turn the other cheek. Blessed are the meek. This seemed to suggest that self-interest was not just morally neutral, it was actively sinful. Pride, the deadliest sin, meant excessive concern with oneself. St. Augustine, writing in the 5th century, developed a framework that dominated Western thought for over 1,000 years. He distinguished between two types of love. Caritas, love of God and others for their own sake. This is good. Cupiditas, love of self and worldly things. This is the root of sin. The message was clear. Selfishness corrupts. Self-denial purifies. But there was a sneaky problem here too. If you deny yourself worldly pleasures in order to gain eternal salvation in heaven, aren't you still acting out of self-interest, just with a longer time horizon? Medieval theologians noticed this. Thomas Aquinas tried to thread the needle. He argued that proper self-love, caring for your soul's salvation, was actually necessary. You can't love others rightly if you don't love yourself rightly. But he was careful. The self you should love is your eternal, spiritual self, not your earthly, bodily, selfish self. This created a fascinating tension in Western thought. Self-interest, bad, but also necessary, but also bad, but also... You see the problem. Now we jump forward to the 1600s and 1700s, the Enlightenment. And here's where things get really interesting. Philosophers are starting to ask a dangerous question. What if self-interest isn't a bug in human nature, but a feature? Thomas Hobbes in 1651 drops a bomb. In his view, humans in their natural state are purely self-interested creatures in constant conflict. Life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. We only cooperate, Hobbes argues, because we're forced to by a powerful government. Self-interest doesn't lead to harmony, it leads to war. We need the state to keep our selfishness in check. But then comes Adam Smith. In 1759, Smith publishes The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And here's what's fascinating. This book is not about free markets or capitalism. It's about sympathy. Smith argues that humans are naturally equipped with the ability to imagine what others are feeling. He calls this fellow feeling or sympathy. We care about others not just because it benefits us, but because we're built to care. We can't help but feel joy at others' happiness and pain at others' suffering. So, where does self-interest fit in? Here's Smith's genius. He argues that we have multiple motivations. Self-interest is one, sympathy for others is another. And here's the key, they don't have to conflict. 17 years later, in 1776, Smith publishes The Wealth of Nations. And here's where he gets famous or infamous depending on who you ask with one particular line. Smith is making a descriptive claim, not a moral one. He's saying, look, the baker doesn't bake bread because he loves you personally. He does it because he wants to make money. And that's fine. The end result is that you get bread. This is the birth of what we now call market logic, the idea that individual self-interest, when channeled through competition and exchange, can produce collective benefit. But, and this is crucial, Smith never said self-interest alone is enough. He wrote 2 books, remember? The sympathy one came first. He thought moral sentiments and self-interest both mattered. Later economists would forget the first book and run wild with the second, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. By the 19th century, capitalism is spreading, and the debate about selfishness becomes urgent. On one side, you have utilitarians like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. They're trying to create a science of ethics based on maximizing happiness. Mill makes a fascinating argument. Yes, seek your own happiness, but, and here's the twist, your happiness is inseparably bound up with everyone else's. You can't be truly happy in a miserable society, and pursuing your own good intelligently means pursuing the general good. Notice the pattern? From Aristotle to Smith to Mill, there's this recurring idea. Properly understood, self-interest and concern for others aren't opposed. They're intertwined. But then the 20th century arrives, and things get intense. In 1943, Ayn Rand publishes The Fountainhead. In 1957, Atlas Shrugged. And in 1964, The Virtue of Selfishness. Rand doesn't just defend self-interest. She makes it the center of morality. In her philosophy, which she calls objectivism, selfishness isn't just permissible, it's the only moral way to live. But here's what makes Rand different from, say, Adam Smith. She explicitly rejects the idea that self-interest and concern for others naturally align. For Rand, altruism, meaning sacrifice of yourself for others, is actually evil. It treats people as means to others' ends. It denies your right to exist for your own sake. Now, Rand is careful to distinguish selfishness from mere whim worship. She's not saying do whatever you feel like. She means rational self-interest, living by reason, productively, pursuing your own happiness through your own effort. And she'd argue she's not against kindness or generosity. She's against obligation, the idea that you owe yourself to others. Rand's ideas became hugely influential in certain circles, especially libertarian and free market advocates, but they also sparked intense backlash. Critics pointed out, Rand's vision works great if you're talented, healthy, lucky. But what about those who aren't? What about children, the disabled, the elderly? If everyone pursues only their own rational self-interest, what happens to those who can't compete? Rand would say, voluntary charity, sure, but not obligation, not sacrifice. Whether you find this inspiring or horrifying probably says a lot about your own moral intuitions. So, where does philosophy stand on selfishness today? The answer is, it's complicated, because we've learned something important over these millennia of argument. Modern philosophers distinguish between different types of self-interest. Psychological egoism, the descriptive claim that humans always act in their own self-interest, even when they think they don't. Most philosophers today think this is false, or at least unfalsifiable. If you define all behavior as self-interested, even altruistic behavior, then the claim becomes meaningless. Ethical egoism, the prescriptive claim that you should pursue your own self-interest. This comes in flavors. Rational egoism says, pursue rational self-interest. But defining what counts as rational gets tricky fast. And then there's the question philosophers have been circling for millennia. Does genuine self-interest actually require concern for others? Contemporary virtue ethicists, following Aristotle, argue yes. Humans flourish in communities. Your well-being depends on relationships, social trust, functioning institutions. Selfish behavior that undermines these things ultimately harms you too. Meanwhile, evolutionary psychologists add another layer. They've found evidence for both selfish and altruistic instincts in humans. We're capable of both. Which raises an interesting point. Maybe the question isn't, should we be selfish or altruistic? Maybe it's, when should we be which? Context matters. Self-care isn't selfish when you're burned out, but hoarding resources during a crisis probably is. Setting boundaries is healthy, but so is sometimes sacrificing for people you love. The philosophical history of selfishness doesn't give us a simple answer, but it gives us better questions. Here's what 3,000 years of arguing about selfishness has taught us. The ancient Greeks were right that we can't flourish alone. Adam Smith was right that self-interest can produce social good when properly channeled. The utilitarians were right that rational self-interest includes concern for others' welfare. And Rand was right that you shouldn't have to sacrifice your life for others' whims. But they were also all missing something, because humans are complicated. We're capable of extraordinary selfishness and extraordinary generosity. We move between them, quietly, constantly. Maybe the real question isn't, is selfishness good or bad? Because every act of generosity takes something, and every act of selfishness gives something. So what are you optimizing for? Approval? Peace? Power? Truth? This has been Chichelle. The question is now yours. What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of world do you want to live in? Philosophy can't answer that for you, but it gives you something more powerful. The awareness that you are part of the answer.